So the title of this month's forum is CUMC and DMC Better Together. The impetus behind this forum came from simply looking out our front or back doors and seeing changes to 4th Street and watching buildings rise 2 blocks away in something called Discovery Square. The Faith to Life team thought it would be good to learn more about the Destination Medical Center, Discovery Square, the Rochester Downtown Alliance, and future plans that hold for an active and vibrant Rochester. In turn, we're hoping that CUMC can share what they've already done with things such as the founding of Thrive Child Care and Family Resource Center to help support associated needs we're hearing in the community. We're hoping there is more we can do together to support growth and opportunities for everyone in Rochester. I know I truly believe in the power of collaboration and partnership, and I am excited by any and all efforts to make Rochester's downtown a vibrant, exciting, welcoming, caring, supportive, active, and innovative destination, as well as a place people call home. I hope there will be opportunities where we can work together and make Rochester better together. So today, I'd like to welcome, I'm going to get my directions right. On my left, we have Kelly Ray Kirkpatrick, City Council member for 4th Ward. Kelly is a lifelong resident of Rochester and was elected in 2020 as 4th Ward representative. Prior to her election to council, Kelly created the Plant the Seed initiative in 2017 to inspire a deeper understanding of our food system. Recent projects include an Olmsted County-wide food security assessment, on which there will be an online discussion this Tuesday at noon, the MLK Park Community Food and Learning Garden, and the Seed Library at Rochester Public Library. Kelly is also a member and previous president of the Eastside Neighborhood Association, past president of Growing Home Minnesota, and the chair of Olmsted County Extension, vice chair, I skipped a line, Green Thumb Initiative, and on the Olmsted County Human Services Advisory Board. Vice chair of the Olmsted County Extension Master Gardener Volunteers, where you can catch her weekly on the Tom and Kelly Show. A Minnesota water steward, co-founder of Transition Rochester, and is part of the UMN Southeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership, and was appointed recently to the Board of Water and Soil Resources. Kelly also helped us with our gardens here at CUMC. In the center is Jamie Rossi, Director of Community and Experience, DMC EDA. Jamie is the Destination Medical Center Director of Community Engagement and Experience. Jamie has had multiple roles on the DMC initiative since she joined the team in 2013 when the DMC legislation passed. She is responsible for development and implementation of community engagement and experience strategy for DMC and the DMC district, focusing on building relationships throughout the community. Holly Masek is the Executive Director of the Rochester Downtown Alliance, a special service district which provides marketing, activation, and public space management services to businesses and property owners in downtown Rochester. Holly's background includes experience in public space management, communications, urban planning, and hospitality. Before joining the RDA, she held positions in private real estate, consulting, and government in Boston. She has a master's degree in urban planning from Harvard University Graduate School of Design and a bachelor's in human geography from Boston University. And now that is way too much of me talking, and I would like to turn it over to our panel. And I will start with Jamie to kind of give an introduction, and then maybe we can go between everyone to talk about their backgrounds and what they want to share today.
That sounds great. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. As mentioned, I'm Jamie Rossi. I have been working on the DMC initiative since it passed legislation in 2013. I didn't include so much of my personal information, but something that I do like to share whenever I'm talking with the community is a little bit about my background. I was actually born and raised in downtown Minneapolis, so I had a very interesting upbringing right in the urban core of the community. We moved around quite a bit, so we were in areas like Lake and Third, the Powderhorn Park neighborhood, and in some of those areas. I went to Augsburg College. I have a business degree there. And then followed my partner out to South Dakota and lived in a rural community of about 1,300 people. I don't think I'd been ever close to a cow before in my life before that moment. So it was a very interesting experience to have this downtown urban experience and then this completely different rural experience. But I use those two experiences in my life today and everything that I do, because it's allowed me to understand, how does an urban environment grow and change and almost breathe in and out? And then what does that look like in a rural experience on a main street? And most of my roles, since I've continued to, I guess, grow in my career, has been thinking about how do we help downtown communities thrive? And that's really where I like to spend most of my time in the work that I do. Maybe, do you want me to talk a little bit about DMC right away, or do you want us to share a little bit more personally, or what would be best, do you think?
Let's do each of you a little personally and
Okay.
then kind of launch into DMC, and then we'll kind of go on
Okay.
how it works between the three.
That
Thank
sounds
you.
great. Maybe just a bit more about myself is that I've lived in Rochester for about 14 years now, and kind of have done a variety of different things since I moved here. I spent my first couple years here working at the clinic, helping to implement the EMR, which is a very random job for me. It was not something that I was planning on doing, but it was a great opportunity to come here and learn more about the clinic. And then from that point on, I've spent my time in a variety of different roles. Right now, I actually have a pretty unique role in that Mayo gifts my time to the DMC initiative. So don't have a formal reporting structure into the organization, but as the DMC initiative came to be, they wanted to contribute to the initiative itself. So since it passed legislation and from some of my previous experience in South Dakota, they asked me if I would be interested in doing this. And so that's just what I've been doing since. So maybe I'll pass it off to one of you. Does that sound good?
Okay. Is the mic on? All right, good. We're getting used to our mute buttons. All right, so I'm Holly Masick. I am not from here. I'm not from Minnesota, but I do have ties to the Midwest. My parents are both from Illinois, but I grew up in New Hampshire, and I grew up in a city about this size that had a delightful Main Streets program, and they were constantly shutting down their historic Main Street to have giant Christmas tree lighting festivals and dances in the street. And as a kid, I just took those things for granted. I didn't know who was doing them, but I did notice that we had this historic center and historic fabric that looked so different and felt so different from the strip malls and everything that was kind of developing around it. And so locked that away, went to college, did some really fun things in my 20s, did some traveling. I worked in a jungle lodge in Belize. I mostly worked in hospitality for a long time. And then it just kind of clicked for me that someone was doing all that work and that I could do that work. And I got a degree in urban planning and I worked for the city for a while and was involved with the creation of a business improvement district there. And then worked for a public space consulting firm and got to do some really fun work on parks and making them just more fun and accessible for people. And then finally, I went to work for one of my clients in private real estate, but it wasn't quite like, I don't know, I was starting to lose that element of giving back to the community. So this job came along by accident. I was trying to move to Minneapolis. I was doing a bunch of informational interviews and like really trying to make connections here. And the people I was talking to were also talking to a recruiter that was looking to fill this role. And they said, how about Rochester? And I was, okay, why not? So I flew out here, and it was just probably because Destination Medical Center was happening. And I saw how much change was happening and how quickly I accepted the role, because in the work that an urban planner does, you'd be working on 30-year time horizons typically. And here we get to see things happen in 1 or 2 or 3 years, which I know can be very shocking to people. Sometimes change at that pace makes people very uncomfortable and start to worry about why their community is changing and doesn't look like what it used to look like. But it's very exciting to be involved in this and to be able to bring the community along in different ways and to adapt and change to the community so quickly. And that's what I'm doing here. Hi, everybody. Very good.
There we go. Is that better? Ooh, much better. Thank you very much. And Carrie did a really great job with kind of stating everything I do. I'm very community service, public service oriented. The only thing I want to say is my dorky glasses are here for a reason. My eyes are really sensitive to lights and I forgot my visor today, so they're a visor. So you'll have to deal with that. I apologize. But otherwise, let's get to the questions.
So do you want me to start a little bit with, I think what might be helpful is, in most conversations, it's kind of fun to go back to DMC like 101, like why are we here? Why did we need it? Why has it started? I think that'll give us some kind of a foundation to start from. And then we can kind of go through some discussion, and feel free to add in, both of you, as we go along. So where I like to start with the DMC initiative is actually, even before I became a part of it, there were some really interesting conversations happening at a national level about healthcare policy around like 2008 and 2009, if you reflect back to that time. And what we found is that our leaders here in Minnesota and in Rochester were spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C., talking with leaders of the nation about healthcare delivery in Minnesota, and specifically Mayo Clinic's healthcare delivery. And during that time, our community and the state was also doing some reflection about where Minnesota was going and what was happening here, and specifically, again, what was happening in Rochester and the growth of Mayo Clinic and the growth of our community. And what we learned through that time, or what they learned at that time, is some interesting information. A big piece of that was that we learned that Mayo Clinic had seen a tremendous amount of growth during the past 20 years. And they were on that same trajectory to see that same amount of growth in the next 20 years. But as they dove into the data, there were a few things that were becoming concerning. One of those was that our city didn't have the tax base to continue to support the growth at which the city was growing as a whole. So not only the clinic, but the infrastructure that was needed for our city to grow, public space, transportation, safety, all these different pieces that grow as a city grows. And so that is what really started to bring people together around how do we help Rochester grow in a thoughtful way, in a smart way, in a mindful way. And a group from across Rochester and the state came together to start to analyze that information. There was a community input and kind of just some early on discussions about what did Rochester need to support growth, and how do we continue to move forward. And that's where the DMC initiative came out of. You might recall in 2013, that was when the piece of legislation passed that's known now today as the Destination Medical Center Initiative. So on the basic level, it's really a gap financing tool. We needed support from the state to invest in Rochester so we could help continue to grow. And it was a really unique model at that time. It's not really a gift of money from the state or from these different pots. What we use that money for from the state is to incentivize growth and help us to prioritize growth in a way that's thoughtful, so we're continuing to work together as a whole community on that growth. You might reflect on some cities that have not grown in a thoughtful way, and that's where you see cities that are very expensive to live in because their infrastructure is all pulled out. And they're not working together, and the DMC initiative allows us that opportunity to do so. So in 2013, that's when the legislation passed. There's a variety of things that are included in that legislation. You may recall that a plan was required. A Destination Medical Center strategic plan was required. And that plan was approved by City Council and the DMCC board in 2015. We did a variety of different community input sessions. Maybe some of you participated in the town hall sessions. They were held at the Civic Center and the library. We got a lot of information from our community about what did we see a 20-year plan look like. And that's just a framework. We use that to help guide the work that we do today. It's not like a master plan use. Am I saying that right? Where it just like doesn't tell us where to put things, but it helps give us a guide. So in the introduction today, we talked about Discovery Square subdistrict. And what that plan did is helped us to begin to understand what are the different areas of our downtown and how can we look at these areas and help to prioritize investment to help to incentivize in future investment. So back to the initiative. So there's the 20-year plan that we needed to create this strategic plan itself. And we update that every 5 years. Another goal of the DMC initiative is to use the investment from the state to attract investment. So our goal is to attract about $6 billion of investment into our downtown core. About half of that is Mayo Clinic investment, and the rest of it is other private investment. There's goals around new jobs, and there's also goals around experience. we recognized when we went back to that original data that our city had seen a tremendous amount of growth, and our core had seen a tremendous amount of growth, but sometimes it felt out of balance because it was growth that was specific maybe just to employees or just to patients. And we knew that to create a vibrant downtown, it was missing that other leg. It was missing our community, and our community voice was missing at times from those decisions. And so as we think about the plan, we needed to make sure that all those were considered as we went forward. So that's kind of the basic of it. We're 5 years into the plan now. We just did a 5-year update to the plan, which helped us. What we did at that point this past year, it was quite interesting to do it in the middle of COVID, in the middle of a pandemic, because it was a different perspective. But in the 5-year plan, we're able to look back and see what growth did we see? Was the plan working, or was it not working? What were the things that we did well at? And what were the things that we didn't do good at? Or what were things that were surprising? And a few things that came out of that 5-year update, I think that are good things to mention as we start a discussion today, is that the plan that our community and state came together, when you measure it upon dollars and investment, that piece shows that that's working really well. We've had about $1 billion of investment in our downtown core over the last 5 years. So we know that like the mathematical side of things are working well. We had some goals around housing and creating new jobs, and those are good as well. We know that we need to continue to think about housing in a different way in our core and how we diversify that in our core as well. But we were able to look at those first 5 years and begin to look at now what do we need to do. With having the impact of the pandemic during this time, there's a couple of things that came out of that. What we now know is that our cities and our downtown cores look a lot different because we have all this extra space that wasn't here before. And because of this kind of review at that time, we're now able to take that information and to think about and put together teams around, how do we use that space downtown differently? There's a few things in that. One of it is a lot of partnership in public space. Outdoor public space is used, was always well used, but now we know is even more demand. So partnering with organizations like the RDA or prioritizing public spaces with the city is incredibly important. The other exciting piece I think about the pandemic is there is a lot of open space, so buildings where offices may have been from before. And now we can think about creative uses for these. It might have been someone felt like it was a barrier because it was too expensive to come downtown. And now we can look at and partner with organizations like Collider Foundation and others to prioritize space for entrepreneurs and other businesses that maybe not had access downtown. So we're starting to build out and build partnerships around that. So we found it was really unique to be able to have the research that we did over the last 5 years and really look at where are downtowns today and how do we grow in the future. And one of the things that we're learning as we're speaking with other downtowns is that there's not very many that are in the position that we are at today because of the planning and the partnerships that were created before. We're very much we're better positioned to see continued growth and continued partnership in the future. A lot of cities that we're finding are still kind of trying to figure out how and what to do. And we've got just a bit more of a step on that as we continue to grow. So maybe I'll pause there and see. I don't know if you have more questions for us or if you want dialogue. What works best, do you think?
We do have more questions. I also want to make sure it's a dialogue with the audience too. If you have questions or things you want to share as we go along. I know I do have questions someone has given me. And like I said, too, we want to make sure when you talk about community feedback and community working together that we're able to share. Oh, I have to be on camera again. We're able to share what we want you to learn about CUMC as well, because we are kind of in the Discovery Square subdistrict and stuff too, and really learning and understanding what that is and how we fit into that piece as well as the greater whole.
Someone that's joining us on Zoom has a question. They said, thank you for this forum. One speaker spoke of different parts of the city working together. I was involved in the 4th Street project and thought parts worked better together, but some parts still seem to be saying they had no intention of working with other groups. How are you going to bring the different groups together?
So wasn't as close to the 4th Street project. Were either of you in that project at all, the 4th Street improvement project? Okay.
I was on the bicycle committee when they were working on forming the lanes, where to determine the best locations within our city to place the bike lanes. And of course, as most theoretical things go, sometimes they don't work out perfectly with implementation and they need to be changed afterward. I think 4th Street has been a really great example of that, of how it's worked really well. Downtown on Center Street is a little different, and we're going to be I actually put a council initiated action forward to bring back the parking meters on the north side of Center Street between Broadway and Civic Center Drive, because the businesses there don't have parking and the cyclists don't feel safe because of the way the parking is. So Public Works is going to be looking at a way to amend that. But all in all, I think the 4th Street project was fairly successful and people's voices were heard. I will say that one of the things I do appreciate about DMC is their community involvement. They've really strived to elevate the voice of the people in the community in getting their feedback. And I think that's only going to improve understanding some of the retrofits that are going on with Heart of the City, the way they've done things, and kind of amending to have a stronger voice of the people involved is really commendable. I'm not sure our city administration was headed in that direction when DMC was formed. So I applaud them for bringing the voices of the people in, and I'm hoping they continue to do that even more so than they have already.
I think maybe 2 examples to give of something that we've been really focused on lately, and maybe over the last couple of years and growing, is 2 concepts. One is called co-working or co-design. Sorry, not co-working, wrong one. Co-design, which is a different approach to how we are doing community engagement. A lot of times in the past or in other cities, what might happen is when you're looking at designing something new like Discovery Walk, you bring a bunch of designers in that are professionals, and they come in and analyze, maybe do a little bit of engagement, bring a design, and then they kind of leave. And we wanted to do this in a different way. And team members from the DMC initiative and from the city, with help from the University of Minnesota, developed a new model called co-design. And this idea is that we actually hire community members to be part of the design team, people that have different lived experiences, different abilities, a variety of different backgrounds, and they're actually part of that work. And that helps us in a lot of different ways. It brings the expertise that we need from the consultants to help design these very technical spaces, like below ground infrastructure and above ground infrastructure, and taking those components. But then it brings the voice of our community right into those spaces. We do extra and additional community engagement in those processes, like we might have different meetings or different activities, or we might prototype and try different activities to engage more community engagement. But the co-design model is something that is new, and it's something that we're applying to a lot of different projects at the moment. So there's co-designers that were part of the Discovery Walk project. There's a co-design group that was brought in for the Rapid Transit project. I believe there's co-design, and that's going to be happening with the Riverfront Reimagine project as well. It's kind of a new way, and it's been working really well, and we continue to evolve it and change it as we go. Another way that working differently is something called the Business Forward strategy. And prior to the DMC initiative, and probably prior city administration, when the city would do public infrastructure projects, they would follow their policies and communicating and sharing with the businesses, what project was coming, the street was going to be changed, or a sidewalk would happen. But what was getting lost was the users of that space's voice and the businesses. And so we came together for the Heart of the City project specifically to say, how can we do this differently? And so prior to construction, our team from the Heart of the City team met with the majority of the businesses. Actually, I think all of them we got a chance to meet one-on-one with, and then small groups with, getting to understand their businesses a little bit more, who their customers were, what their concerns were. Had they gone through construction before like this? What did they learn? What went well and why? What were their major concerns this time? We took all that information back to our team, analyzed it, tried to look for priorities and themes, brought it back to the all the businesses and said, this is what we heard. Is this right? Is it wrong? Is there something that we missed? So we took that information back and then shared that information with our construction teams and our engineering teams and said, how can we look at this project completely differently? How do we phase construction with these priorities that the businesses said were important to them? And so some of those pieces in that project specifically were the sound of construction and dust were extremely important. Access to their front doors and their back doors were a priority. They needed to get deliveries in and out, garbage in and out. We knew that we could not disrupt the front doors. It was really fascinating part of the project where we went out and explored other projects from across the country that did something like this, where maybe like the Green Line up in Minneapolis, they would shut down streets at a time and businesses just shut down during that time. And we knew with our core, we had all these visitors and community members and people that were in and around the downtown that shutting down streets just was not an option for us. And we needed to think about this differently. And typically in construction, I'll also add, it's like, how do you do it the quickest or how do you do it the cheapest? And how do you, meet your budgets? And we said, okay, how do we turn this around to make sure that our businesses are the priority? And that's really where this business forward strategy came out of. So we were able to reprioritize and microphase the project to keep the business's doors open and make sure that their priorities were heard. Then we met with them on a weekly basis. Because of COVID, we switched to Zoom calls, but every Friday through the whole entire phase of the project and continuing now, we meet every Friday morning at 8:45 with the businesses to talk about how's it going, what are the updates, and then they give us feedback on how we're doing. And we have big open conversations and honest conversations. And then we take their ideas if they see something that's not working right. So for example, if a walkway isn't clear, they think we need better signage, or maybe there's something else that's not working. We take those ideas and we try to implement them right away as soon as possible to make improvements. And so that's just a quick example of the business forward strategy, and now that business forward strategy is being applied to other projects like the Broadway project and other projects that are coming down the pipeline from the city. And that's been a different way that we're working and a different way that we're building partnerships from like the foundational part of the project from the beginning. Hopefully that's helpful with the question that was asked.
I have a question up here. Hold on.
I'll speak loud.
Okay.
In your 5-year plan, just to get during what changes are work for then?
Sure, it's a great. Sure. So the question was in the 5-year plan and the impact of the pandemic, has it changed our plan? And I think, of course, it informed it greatly. All of our teams have been watching really closely. How does a downtown shift and change with this? And so we're learning as we're going, and we partner a lot with RDA and trying to learn as we go about, where our employees coming. So one of the things that we learned together, I think this summer was while employees were downtown during the day to take advantage of events like Thursdays or different activities, they may not be downtown during the day as densely, but they're coming back at night or they're coming back on the weekends. And so how are we adjusting and how are we learning from that as we go? I don't know if you want to add more to that at all.
Sure. Yep. I will say that something that had already been on our radars was that downtown is really growing its residential population quite a lot. We've added over 900 housing units in 10 years. And we know that those residents, they want to live downtown. Yes, it's probably convenient for work, but we also have a lot of empty nesters who are retired and they just want the walkable 15-minute neighborhood life. And so we have spent a lot more time investigating who those people are, what they want from downtown. Some research that had sort of passed by without, I think, too much fanfare from DMC a couple of years ago. They dropped a number that a downtown resident spends 7 times more in a year than a downtown employee. So while we do have a number of employees that are now hybrid or perhaps going to be working remotely permanently, we also have a number of new residents who have a lot more spending potential downtown and could make a big impact on what the downtown businesses are able to do and how they're able to thrive. we also love seeing that 24-hour energy in the downtown neighborhood. It makes it feel safer at different times of day versus having more of a 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. cadence to the neighborhood Monday through Friday, where the evenings tends to be quieter and a little less safer feeling. So to us, this just accelerated research of who are these people, what do they want, how can we engage them? And now downtown doesn't currently have a neighborhood association, unfortunately, which I think is a shame because this is the moment when they really need one. We want to talk to downtown residents. We're doing targeted research right now, doing focus groups, surveys, talking to building managers, and we're excited to work with them.
I think a piece of that discussion that came out of that 5-year plan was the need to do a deeper dive into understanding the downtown residents. And with that information, with a group that's looking at a kind of downtown retail entertainment plan, is something that is in the process of being worked on as well. So as we learned about COVID and its impacts, we began to still understand that there's still a high demand for people to live downtown, that the neighborhood was growing and changing. It's hard to predict what the employees are going to do because we're in the moment right now, and we know what we're dealing with today. But we continue to keep an eye on what does that look like. And as I mentioned from before, what we're learning from other cities and our own is that because in our case, Mayo Clinic, for example, has vacated space, it opens it up for other businesses to come in. Another example of continued success over, COVID is the continued growth of, and I'm directionally challenged, Discovery Square. Where am I pointing? That way. Is the continued interest by businesses and organizations from around the globe that are interested in having a presence here and collaborating and working. And so that's been really exciting as well, to continue to learn and to grow and to see the companies that are interested in being a part of here, which brings more jobs and more community members to come be a part of that. So those are some of the bigger kind of nuggets of pieces that we're learning from COVID. And then also it is informing some of our public space design as well. How are people using spaces? For example, Heart of the City was designed with information that we studied about use of downtown from employees and visitors, and what were people looking for from our community that didn't feel connected. So that informed that design. But now that we've gone through COVID, and as we think about Discovery Walk and that component of it, we're learning about how people are using spaces differently and how we need to enhance that design as well for future use.
I have a question if no one else has one right now. Kind of builds on that. You're talking about Heart of the City, and I think it works into RDA too, but what is the status of the Heart of the City project? And are any changes being made to the overall plan or construction work? I know Peace Plaza was used this weekend very successfully for the dogs downtown and has been being used.
Yeah, so from the beginning with the Heart of the City project and the business forward strategy, we wanted to make sure that we were working closely with the RDA and other organizations to use the space as much as possible. So the West Side, for example, has been pretty much activated the whole time. We had a unique situation because of COVID. So the project started actually the same day that the state shut down. And so we brought our teams back together to try to understand how could we, do we move forward with it? How do we leverage the opportunity that all of a sudden no people were downtown? Because we had built a plan to work around users of the space. So there was no big equipment that was going when people were coming into the downtown, and there was sound and dust and all these different components. But once people left, we shifted the strategy to try to take advantage as much as possible of people not being downtown, and how do we move it forward and accelerate it. Another priority of that project was to making sure that it wasn't just, let's keep the gates up and when it's done, let's pull the fencing down. It was, let's roll back the fencing as it's available. And it might not always be perfect. And we might have to go back and tweak what you're seeing today. But we wanted to make sure that we could use it as much as possible. So for example, you may have noticed over the summer that the south side of First Avenue, that street was opened first. And then we're able to open the north side, and then we've been pulling back the fences as much as possible every time that we finish something. And we'll continue to do that as we move forward through the project. Right now, the fencing, the area that they're focused on the construction project is the west side of the plaza, which is the most kind of intricate portion of the design, which is east side of the plaza. Gosh, he directionally challenged. East side of the plaza is where between in front of the chateau and the Galleria area, they're working on an art piece that sits within a scrim pool of water. And so that takes just a little bit more intricate and detail of work that they're there. So that should be done end of October, early November is what we're anticipating that the plaza will be completely done.
Oh, got one up here.
It seems to me that one of the big issues has always been in communities is how information is shared. And when this church worked on the concept of building this space that we are in, one of the things we did was to send out individuals in the community to interview leaders and so forth and say, what does this community need in order that we can be part of it? And out of that came this addition, which we would hope would be a place for people to meet. And as I think of the discovery area that is going to be on the perimeter of this area, where would we deposit the information that this space is available for community meetings or possibly noonday academic meetings? I think this is just one example. We did the same thing when we looked at the campaign of what was the big need for us to respond to in the community, and our child care center, Thrive, became into being, which is right downtown, as you know, in this building. I think there's so many ways that we want to be part of community building and involvement, but it's very difficult to know how to deposit information about that so that it is known throughout the planning and the system that's working.
I think that's really great feedback. So a few things. I'm really glad that I'm here today to help build relationships with each of you, and I can definitely be kind of a point person. So let's make sure that we connect on that. I think right now is a wonderful time to make some connections to our team that's focused on the Discovery Square subdistrict and the planning of that. Chris Shad is his name. He is somebody that we should definitely make some connections to as well as they're looking at some of those planning efforts. Because from the beginning, one of my roles within the DMC initiative, it's changed throughout, was like I did get a chance to help lead the work around the beginnings of the Discovery Square subdistrict. And when we were starting to do that work, the neighborhood was one of the highest priorities, is that it couldn't just be a group of innovative buildings designed inside uniquely. The whole place needed to work together like a neighborhood. And so we really felt from the beginning that the organizations that were already in the neighborhood were extremely important to build upon. So let's make some connections with Chris from our team, and we can make sure that those connections are made and start talking about some of those pieces. I think are good. And then if there's other things that, like you said, understanding what the needs are, like with Thrive or others, we should definitely think about how do we, where those conversations are happening, what data we have access to that might, that could be shared. And maybe you guys have other ideas as well, but let's start there for sure.
I think it would be a really great idea for DMC to catalog the sub-districts, the assets that are within each of the sub-districts, and then it becomes a platform that everybody can use and work from to know where those places are to utilize a venue for a particular need. And so I guess I come at it from a different, instead of understanding what their needs are, gather all those assets, and then you can categorize them and organize them, and then folks would know how to utilize them.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
I think too, that kind of builds in when I think about it. And I think about the more and more people living downtown too, and wondering about those demographics, whether it's retirees or families with children that would need childcare resources downtown or things like that too. Do you know the demographics of?
Oh, can I give the demographics
Yeah.
off the top of my head? We have about 4,000 people living downtown, and that's just within a half-mile radius of First Avenue and Second Street. We call that the center, just arbitrarily, just that's kind of the center of our world at this moment. And then I can actually share some of this data with you, and we are going to have a presentation about it that is first for our downtown stakeholder community next Monday, but after that, we can make it pretty publicly available. Like I said, we added 900 housing units, which means we have about 1,900 in the downtown. And it's been a real shift lately, because prior to that, it was actually very geared towards more senior populations. We have some senior affordable housing downtown. We have Charter House downtown, and that's actually a wonderful environment, I think, for populations that may not want to drive anymore, that they can walk to all of these wonderful things in the community. And I don't know, I'm going to share a fun fact I learned this week. Steam Cafe Broadway's busiest day is now Sunday. It is not a work day. So we are definitely seeing a shift to people who live downtown and use downtown in a leisure way, really enjoying that environment. But the new residents that we're seeing, they are between, I'd say, 20 and 65. We have, young graduate students that are living in smaller units at the Hugh or 318 Commons as college students, but then we have a lot of young professionals, a hugely international audience downtown, which is very exciting, very well traveled. And then, as I mentioned, the empty nester population is quite a cool, fun population that we've got coming on. And I could definitely see my parents wanting to move into a city. Many of my friends' parents have sold their homes, downsized, and moved into apartments or condos downtown. So as we get that, I will share it with you.
Thank you. Is there another, right here?
We're in the process of converting our inner courtyard to a healing garden. And I was wondering what your recommendations are for inviting the public to enjoy that space.
That sounds amazing. That sounds really wonderful. I think just like what we're talking about today, I think it'd be great to learn a little bit more about it. And then as a group, I think we could help make some of those connections, whether it's sharing information through some of our outlets. We have newsletters and social media and things that we try to help share information about our community with, but are also connected to other platforms like the RDA. So that could be some ways, but I'm sure we could brainstorm some other components. It'd be great to just learn overall too, what are some of the other areas that you'd like the community to connect with? We can think about how and in different ways in which we can share that, whether it's with visitors that are coming here, like with Experience Rochester, and what's the information that they're sharing with convention goers or other visitors, maybe making some connections inside the clinic with their community engagement team as well, and their patient experience teams. Just a few things off the top of my head, but would love to make those connections. It sounds like a really, really wonderful resource.
We do have newsletters, social media, quite a maps on our website. We are unfortunately, to kind of explain it, because we are restricted to 44 blocks and we specifically serve the property owners in those 44 blocks, we have to be a little careful about adding too much outside the district into our promotional materials. But as we know about resources like that, we find ways to work them in, because we definitely think this is part of our walkable downtown experience. So while it may not fit right within our rules, we just figure something else out, and we like to know ourselves. So thank you for sharing that. I did not know.
I just want to commend you on finishing your labyrinth. I believe my daughter started at the Montessori school here in 1997 before we built the new property, 2006, out on West 7th Street in Country Club Manor. And 2 of my children attended here. And I remember hearing conversations about the labyrinth way back then. So it's really awesome that you've been able to complete that, especially since I guess Calvary Episcopal doesn't have theirs anymore. I was in their courtyard the other day and I didn't see the labyrinth. So thank you for getting that completed.
I have a question regarding the 4th Street experience out here. I hear a lot of feedback and get a lot of feedback from that. And I'll just summarize it by the Minnesota expression. Well, that's different. But I'm curious what the data now shows in your experience, because I hear so many that are concerned about approaching, either coming onto 4th Street, like for example, right out here, coming onto 4th Street as a pedestrian or as a car. Those cars that are parked outside of the new lanes block your vision of oncoming traffic. So my question is, what does the data show about the traffic flow and the problems, but the safety? Has that helped the safety of that street? Does the data show that we have less accidents, more accidents? I'd like to hear about that, because it's a real frustration for pedestrians and cars to either approach or cross 4th Street now. I mean, it's like you're taking your life in your own hands. You kind of peek around and try to be safe, but it's different.
I'm not as close to that project. Do you have information, Kelly, about any current data or what they're studying right now?
Unfortunately, I don't, but I will turf your question to Sam Budzina. He is our Public Works Traffic Engineer, and he has a lot of information. He's a smart young man, knows his stuff. So I will see what I can do to pull that information for you and get it back to who I need to share that with your congregation, so that you can all be aware. I don't know if any data has been gathered since the project has been completed, but we will find out for you. So that's a very good question.
I want to echo what Dean just said. I recently had to park on the north side of the street on 4th Street. Excuse me. And I felt very unsafe. I mean, I felt like I was out in the middle of the road, opened my door to get past the traffic that's moving swiftly. So I felt very unsafe. But my main thought here is I know from what I'm understanding, it sounds like for the residents that are down here, you want to try to be able to provide them whatever their needs are. Could be groceries, could be entertainment, could be green space. I'm wondering if the thought in there too is to be able to accommodate their faith. Mayo's talking more and more over this last several years about the importance of faith and how that can be extremely healing, peace-giving to both the patient, to their families, to the relatives. So I'm just really feeling the appreciation of having this church downtown. I've been a member of this church for 71 years, and I really feel the value here, plus all the things that the church has to offer. So I'm just wondering how much they're wanting to keep a faith environment available. St. John's Church is also down here, and several other churches.
Yeah, so I believe maybe something to go back to is when the DMC initiative was created and goals were created around that. The 5th goal, and the goal that I spend a lot of my time in, is thinking about how we create an experience in our downtown for patients, visitors, and community members. And something that we talk a lot about is this neighborhood of the downtown and how important that is. And looking back, how there's components that we're missing. I mean, you could easily point to not that long ago that there wasn't a grocery store, or there wasn't these different components. And I think a space in a neighborhood does include the faith community. And so from a DMC perspective, we find that all of those components are incredibly important. And it's something that we need to be paying close attention to and working closely with. So it's, I don't know if it's like specifically called out in a plan about like how many need to be where. That's not the type of work that we do, but it's creating this vibrant downtown and understanding what people are looking for, whether it's, a young person that's studying at the clinic or the empty nester that Holly mentioned. Is what are the needs of the downtown and how are we working together to make sure that those needs are met? And it's something that we pay really closely attention to, what people are looking for. So I think it aligns really, really well with what you're asking about.
I'm really interested in the housing topic. So I'm just wondering, and I like statistics. So I'm just wondering of the units that have been built, how much are rental versus ownership? How much sort of mixed, income levels and things. And then I'm also curious if there's any plans going forward about housing that would have a street presence, because it seems like everything's sort of built on the same model as being, sort of second floor and above. And I'm just curious, I've seen other bigger cities than us that have more of that sort of townhouse model, even in Minneapolis along the riverfront. So I'm just curious if you know of any of those initiatives that are out there.
Sure. Can I? Yep, you go ahead. Start. Yep. Just to speak to rental versus ownership, it's almost exclusively rental. And the reason for that is a bit of a quirk in Minnesota law where condo developers are required to continue to repair the buildings for something like 10 years after they sell the units off. And so it's really put a damper on condo development. The only units we have downtown right now are in the, what is the hotel called now? It's now called Hotel Indigo. So those units that have been up above there for a long time. And then there are some units very close to you as well, a couple of buildings, but you'll notice those are all older buildings. There hasn't been anything built very recently. I'm not sure if that law has changed, but I know people are working on it. And then as far as the design, whether there will be townhouse models or the reason that hasn't been done so far is right in the core, there's a real priority on very active street front experience. And yes, we do want retail, and retail is a tricky model in this environment, but I'm still pretty confident that something will be solved for in those spaces. But I think all types of design are being considered in the future. There are design guidelines, but there are no strict design requirements out there right now for housing building. And as far as affordability goes, I'm going to send it to Jamie or Councilmember Kirkpatrick. I think they have more data.
So I actually had this conversation with the developer who wants to do City Walk just right up here to the northwest on 6th Avenue and 2nd Street. Conversing with them during their developer information meeting, the DIM that they hosted a couple of months ago. And both Councilmember Bransford and I encouraged them to create condos versus a rentable model so that people could, build wealth through ownership. And there is a reluctance on developers to build units that are purchasable because of that law. And I don't remember either if it's changed or not. I want to say that it has changed, but there's a lag in that risky, entrepreneurial spirit of a developer taking it on and saying, yes, I'm going to build a condo. So hopefully that shift is changing. I know that there have been some designs in the works, various parts of our downtown area, probably within, which I consider downtown to be within the 6s, 6th and 6th east and west, and 6th and 6th north and south. So those developers are considering doing condos, but there again, I don't like to use the word affordable because each one of us sitting in this room, affordability means something different. An affordable home is technically 30% of your income. And whether you're retired, whether you're the CEO of Mayo, whether you're the president of a corporation, or whether you're a worker in one of our cafeterias that serves our Mayo patients, we all need affordable housing. So the key is how do we spread that across for everyone? And despite the 900 units that have been added in the last 10 years, Mayo understands their growth rate and they plan ahead and in order for them to bring in their suggested 20 to 30,000 people in the next 10 years that they wanted prior to COVID, there is no way that we can keep up with that building rate. It's not it's not possible. So we're in a real paradigm shift here. COVID has thrown something at us that has disrupted supply chains. It's enabled builders to not build at the rate they were because of supply costs. So we really all need to put our heads together here to figure out how our community can support all of the folks that need housing, whether you're on the higher end of the spectrum or the lower end of the spectrum, to create, building wealth through home ownership as well as rental models to live in.
Maybe just another piece to add, and thinking just about data and information that might be helpful, is there is a group that comes together. It's a pretty significant group that's led by the Rochester Area Foundation around housing. And they just went through an updated study. It's called the Maxfield Study. We've used that over the last 5 years and just got updated again to help us understand what the current environment is for housing. But then literally everybody is at the table, from the county to city to DMC to all the organizations and nonprofits that help in the housing world, to help build strategies about how we're managing housing needs and where we're prioritizing that. So if it's helping people move into home ownership, all the different levels of housing. So like the brick apartments that are going in, that help to inform what was needed there. And it helps to inform across the whole city. But it's a really great group to be a part of. And if that's an area that's of interest, it'd be great to make those connections into that group so that you have access to the information and the conversations and how the community as a whole are helping to work through some of those components. And it's a really, really great group to be involved with. Housing Coalition is the name of it. So we can make some connections there as well. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. What is the average rental cost downtown?
Well, that's going to be a tricky one because there are actually a lot of designated affordable units. But are you curious about the newer ones? Is that more what you're trying to?
I'm just thinking right in the downtown area.
I don't have that figure directly in front of me, but I can get it.
Okay.
The TIF model that a lot of developers use, the application, I hope I get this data correct. They are able to write in the percentage of homes that they want to be at. Again, here is this term that I'm uncomfortable using, affordable, which generally means something below 60% AMI. So they can designate a portion of the building to be 40, 50, 60% AMI, which is what the brick model does. And what's special about the brick is that they've done that in perpetuity. That isn't going to expire after a few years, like the flats on 3rd, flats on 4th. Those expired and they've gone to a higher AMI, adjusted median income, average median income. So that building model can shift, and we're looking at how to house people at all income levels throughout our city.
We're getting near the end of our time. I want to make sure if we have any more questions here. I have one really quick question, if you don't mind going over a little bit about transportation. We've recently been looking, like on Thursday, and there was a celebration about transportation. We had something Saturday downtown too as well. The route systems around. If you could just talk a little bit about the transit system rapid transit we're trying to, because Christ United Methodist Church pre-COVID had something like Saturday noon meals. Like, we're trying to find, when we can have those back at our church again, finding easier ways for people to get around. Is that possible with this new system we're talking about?
It's a great question. Transportation is another really super complex issue in our community. And it's one, again, that was probably built up around Mayo Clinic employees or the downtown employee needs. And then we had all these different transportation systems that were moving people all the way around. And it just, because we built and we needed it, it just happened. So you have hotels that are moving people, and public transportation and private transportation and all these components. So over the last probably 4 years, there was an extensive amount of studying, like we studied and studied and studied. There's a lot of studying going on, but we needed to try to understand what was the current environment, how do we see ourselves growing, and then how do we need to shift so that we can have a system downtown that's really integrated and helps people prioritize where they go. People were misusing transportation options because it was easy or they didn't have another one. So you may have heard of people plugging meters all day. Well, it's because they're doing that because there's not another easy option for them. So the teams came together to understand that. And from that now is the transportation plan that integrates a variety of different things. City loops, so bike loops and walking loops are part of that and connecting to our broader infrastructure with biking. And then the bus rapid transit system is a big component of that. Over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of engagement and conversations and trying to understand where and when it needs to go and how we prioritize that work. So the first phase of that project is set to be complete, I believe in 2025. Construction would start in 2023. And the first part of that is a rapid transit bus that would connect out from Cascade Lake down to the Mayo Civic Center. There's a variety of different stops. I want to say there's 12 stops. I'd have to look again and see. I can get you more information too. But the idea is that it's a hop on, hop off, very easy model where you're on and off on the bus. And there would be a bus in this location every 10 minutes. And it just constantly moves throughout, back and forth throughout that line. They're also working on the second phase of that, which would be connecting it on Broadway and Second, and then going down to the fairgrounds. And so eventually that'll be connected in those two areas. There is a bus rapid transit. On Saturday, we held a mobility fair, which kind of highlighted a variety of different transportation options. There's a model, a full-scale model that's built right across from the library that you can kind of get a sort of sense of what is that experience like. And so that'll be up for the next, I guess it's 2 more weeks now, that'll be up, and the community's invited to go check it out. There's information online too of different information sessions, so you can go on your own or go visit one of those. And then we'll continue to work through that plan. But I would imagine that construction for that would be middle of 2023.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Well, then I want to just really thank you again for your time today, all three of you. I really wish we could have another hour kind of to answer more questions or ask more questions from you. Does anyone have any other questions they wanted to ask? All right, then thank you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And please feel free to invite us back at another forum if you'd like.